conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, June 19, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Imani Perry, professor of African American Studies at Princeton University, author South to America, A Journey Below the Mason-Dixon to Understand the Soul of a Nation on Juneteenth. Why it exists, what utility it has in our society, and more. Also on the program today, new reporting, FBI and the DOJ resisted investigating Trump's role in January 6th for a year.
Thank God for Merrick Garland. Just kidding. Useless.
Turns out that when it looks like the DOJ is doing nothing, it is actually not a secret plan to do something. Meanwhile, Blinken and Xi pledged to stabilize Chinese-American ties. Government shutdown seeming more likely in the wake of a debt ceiling deal that was ostensibly negotiated to avoid a government shutdown.
How the Republicans go back on their word?
Scientists freaking out even more than normal over warming records that appeared to have begun to outpace our models. Medicaid purge grows. Well over 1 million have lost health care in the past 2 months. DOJ report on Minneapolis police is scathing. Reform negotiations begin between the city and the feds. A new Texas law will slash labor protections locally, including ordinances that allow construction workers 10-minute water breaks. New study shows gas stoves release benzenes at levels comparable to secondhand smoke. Lastly, jurors convict the Pittsburgh synagogue shooter. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is Monday, June 19th, Juneteenth. Federal holiday for many, but not for Emma Vigeland.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Or Matt Leck.
Or Matt Leck.
Or Bradley
Alsop. Or myself.
That's no problem.
Yeah. So fun day Monday.
Fun day Monday. No school. Do we have mail delivery? I don't think we do, right? Federal holiday. And so on. This is a new holiday as of...
no, yeah, it seems U.S.
2 years ago.
Postal Service office is not open today.
It's a new holiday as of this is the second year I think that we're celebrating it, or I guess maybe I think the first year
It was an observed.
Okay.
It fell on a weekend, I believe, last year.
Okay.
So.
Well, Josh Hawley has something for us to keep in mind. Today is a good day to remember Christianity is the faith and America is the place slavery came to die. So
there you go.
So,
I mean,
after it flourished, it also died here. So we deserve credit for that part.
It also where
kinda
slavery
late.
came to die. I mean, we were one of the last countries to get rid of slavery.
Yes.
So I guess in that sense,
we did beat Brazil by a few decades, but
that's good.
We were behind like Britain, for instance.
yeah.
Yes.
That's an interesting construction where
Right.
slavery came to die. Also, you could say the same thing about like, I don't know, cancer when it takes the life of somebody. I mean, like it's just a weird construction. But nevertheless, it is Juneteenth. We're going to be talking to Imani Perry on it. it's interesting, the development of a new holiday, and interesting to think about, why we have it and what it hopefully will function to do. But let's hear, because we are all about hearing both sides of an argument. One is, should we celebrate the end of slavery in this country, and or the ostensible end of slavery in this country, or is it an evil plot? Well, let's give some equal time to the evil plot side of the argument. I give you, ladies and gentlemen, Charlie Kirk, the would-be Rush Limbaugh.
Some of you will be listening to this episode as it airs on Juneteenth. The heck is Juneteenth? It depends who you ask.
Pause it for 1 second. I guess he took it off. I guess he took today off. Weird, but okay.
That's funny. Also, like, maybe like schooling is good for something. We should like kids should know what Juneteenth is.
No, they shouldn't. No, they shouldn't. That sounds like critical race theory to me.
Some of you will be listening to this episode as it airs on Juneteenth. The heck is Juneteenth? It depends who you ask, okay? But let's talk about what it actually is. And we opposed Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday as it happened. And yes, it is the day that it is mandatory to work at Turning Point USA. We're going to talk about it actually on the day. I say we're given multiple days off for our actual Independence Day, July 4th, 1776. Why is Juneteenth a problem? Not because, again, it's so subversive. On its face value, I have no problem with it. I think it's wonderful to say, okay, liberation of slaves, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. The issue is that the entire point of it, as per postmodernists do and deconstructionists, is to subvert July 4th. That has always been the agenda. That there's a Black Independence Day and a National Independence Day. The same way that they have a Black national anthem that plays before NFL games. That they have Black-only dormitories and Black-only math classes. It is a neo-segregationist federal holiday, is what it is. And they're so tricky, aren't they? Because they say, oh, Charlie, you against the emancipation of slaves? Of course we're not against that, because that's not what this is about. This is a summertime competitor to create multiple Independence Days to further deteriorate, erode, and destroy the celebration of our actual Independence Day. I tweeted this out in 2021. In 2021...
Summertime competitor. Like, it's like the XFL versus the NFL. They're coming for our football.
Hey, guys, I know we were going to barbecue on the 4th, but I'm sorry, I did it in the middle of June, so don't want to do it today.
That was how segregation the first time was instituted, was they did their own, the white people, Jim Crowites, did their own holiday, and then what happens when you do your own holiday is naturally it creates its own gravity.
I'll tell you something. We had I don't know where the fireworks were the other night for Flag Day, and I'm like,
this is subverting.
Don't need July 4th.
I mean, isn't Hanukkah a wintertime competitor to Christmas?
I mean,
are you trying to subvert?
Actually, Charlie will argue that too.
He would, and you know what? It's a good thing that it subverts Christmas a little. I'm glad that if we're trying to cut into the fanciful notion that July 4th was Independence Day with another holiday that recognizes that it wasn't actually Independence Day because there was slavery in this country. Yeah. I'm all for undercutting our mythology about this country because it is exclusionary and it is just that, a myth.
Infantile. Like, again, like right. Josh Hawley mentioning us getting rid of slavery. We did, like, in 1820, there's an essay from a Scottish guy saying America says they're so independent and freedom-loving, and they are all slave drivers.
Right. Let's. Do we have any more of this? Let's keep playing. Yeah, because the interesting thing is we'll see how much it becomes about ideological. But I also have another theory that these type of attacks sort of force the interpretation of June 19th into a box that doesn't do the work that it should be doing.
One, I tweeted out, making Juneteenth a federal holiday isn't about emancipation of slaves. If it was, they would make September 22nd, Emancipation Proclamation Day, a federal holiday. This is about replacing July 4th, just like the 1619 Project is about replacing 1776. Conservatives must reject this. So yeah, I mean, if they want to make an Emancipation Day, just make September 22nd a federal holiday. But now we have a full week of Juneteenth festivities.
He would not support that either.
A full week.
I feel like he didn't.
We have a whole
work on
month
this
during
enough.
Pride Month, and at some point, you got to wonder. And the answer to the question is actually very simple. Why do these people need so much celebration? Why do these people need so many rituals? And the answer is super simple.
These people.
It's because they're not religious. Well, they're religious in their own way, but
Oh my God.
those of us that go to church, we're part of something. Those of us that, if you're an observant Jew, so if you
God
That's
made
it.
it. God kept him from finishing that statement.
Yes, thank you.
What's amazing is how convoluted his critique is here. Like, he would prefer this back in September. So he is literally talking about the close proximity to July 4th, undercuts July 4th. But if it was in September, it wouldn't undercut July 4th. So it's not so much an ideological thing as literally
Proximity.
It literally, like, you know, it's not a summer thing. But of course, a lot of kids still in school now, not in July, which he's not contemplating that. And then he's sort of like roping it into Pride Month and saying the real problem is that people aren't religious enough. Like, as if like, rates of religion amongst black people relatively high in this country. It's unclear to me. Like, it's so convoluted here what he's talking about. Why do religious people have to celebrate the 4th? Wouldn't that keep them from celebrating the 4th? If under his theory, it's.
But what he needs to say is, like, we actually are the authors of history and black people are doing it wrong.
Exactly.
Right. The subtext of everything he's saying is that I don't want another reminder for the general public that we enslaved a certain segment of the population, and no one's precluding precluding you from also recognizing it and taking Juneteenth to have these kinds of conversations. It's not exclusionary in the way he describes, but it is when you have a reactionary mind.
I think one of the things, and I think this is worth actually talking to Imani Perry about, despite the fact that I'm hesitant to mention the words Charlie Kirk in front of her. There is a reason why Juneteenth is celebrated as opposed to the Emancipation Proclamation Day, and that is because slaves were not freed when the Emancipation Proclamation was announced. In fact, the relationship of black people to white people was not cured on Juneteenth either, for that matter. And I do think that the real issue they have with Juneteenth is that it makes it clear that the United States never achieved the aspirational or supposed things that we set out to do supposedly in that regard. And we'll talk more about it with Imani Perry in a moment. A couple of words from our sponsors. Don't forget, this show has been sponsored by JustCoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate, for its entire run. It's the only advertisement we've had from the beginning. Great coffee. They're a co-op out of Madison, Wisconsin. They were giving out free coffee as far back as the protests against Scott Walker. And they have a majority report blend that they've had for 11 years. So check it out. Get 10% off with the coupon code majority. Also, this show is sponsored today by Zippix. They are nicotine toothpicks designed to help you stop putting smoke and vape in your lungs. Super hard to get off of nicotine. I've been there, folks. I smoked for decades. And I tried a ton of different things. as far as I know, these didn't exist at the time. But if anybody watches the show on a regular basis, you see I still am chomping on toothpicks all the time. If you feel that it is time for you to stop putting smoke and vape oils in your lungs, you can get your nicotine fix without having to rely on smoking and vaping. Zippix toothpicks give you an easier and healthier, more discreet way to get your fix. They're available in 6 flavors. They have options in 2 milligrams and 3 milligrams of nicotine, so you can sort of like wean yourself off. And then once you've weaned yourself off or you're ready to jump off of the nicotine, you can try their caffeine and B12 infused toothpicks, which I'm chomping on a regular basis. Can't find my container right now. They come in, they have containers like this, and I have that great wood container that is. But they're great in that respect, and it will help you get away from that nicotine habit. Zippix has already helped tens of thousands of customers leading a healthier lifestyle. And if you currently smoke or vape, they can probably help you too. Make your lungs happy. Try Zippix nicotine toothpicks. You ditch the cigarettes, you ditch the vape. Get some nicotine infused toothpicks at zippixtoothpicks.com today. Get 10% off your first order by using the code MAJORITY at checkout. Your lungs, and frankly, your family and your future family and everybody around you and your significant other, if you have one, are going to be glad you did. And a disclaimer, this product contains nicotine, which is an addictive chemical. You must be 21 or older to order. Zip more, smoke less with Zippix nicotine toothpicks. We'll put the link in our podcast and YouTube description. And a quick break, and we'll be right back with Imani Perry, professor of African American Studies at Princeton University. Right back after this. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. It's a real pleasure to welcome to the program Imani Perry. She's a professor of African American Studies at Princeton University. Her most recent book, South to America, A Journey Below the Mason-Dixon to Understand the Soul of a Nation. Professor, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Before I mentioned, before our break that I was going to bring up Charlie Kirk to you, I'm going to hold off for a moment so that, but again, apologies for that. But let's just, this is the second year, I think, that we are actually observing Juneteenth. It was declared a holiday, I guess, 3 years ago on the 21st. I mean, 2021. I'm confused about how that works in terms of the time. But just give us what the ostensibly this holiday is celebrating.
Right. So it's a portmanteau of June and 19th, and it's celebrating when General Granger made his way into Galveston, Texas, and declared enslaved people free. Now, that was 2 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, and it was a sort of the last official order of the Civil War that allowed people who were enslaved to actually experience what it was to be emancipated. And of course, it celebrates that in a sort of, it is appropriate that it's a celebration, but it wasn't sort of easily executed freedom. There were people who tried to re-enslave folks. There were still skirmishes. There was violence, and of course, there were black codes almost immediately afterwards. And really, it required both the 13th and 14th Amendment to begin to even experience freedom substantively. But it was the day that they call the Day of Jubilee in Texas historically. And it spread to some adjacent states. And there you have Juneteenth.
This is where I'll bring up Charlie Kirk, because I just read a piece by Peniel Joseph in the Texas Monthly, and I can't remember when we had him on, but he argues that it's more than likely that the people in Galveston, that slaves in Galveston knew of the Emancipation Proclamation, and that. So it wasn't as if, this was a surprise and it was, and clearly they had to lay low in that instance. How much of citing Juneteenth as the day, as the holiday to sort of ostensibly celebrate the end of slavery is a function of the idea that, like, this is sort of more of a process than a thing that actually has happened?
Oh, absolutely. It was a process. I mean, the process is so protracted. I mean, in many ways, you can say that the process continued into the mid-20th century because, the rights that were guaranteed by the Civil War and the Reconstruction Amendments actually aren't fully protected until the mid-20th century. Reconstruction is such a brief period. So I think that's right. It was a process, but there is this culture that develops in Black communities, and Juneteenth is one example, of simultaneously celebrating moments of progress, even when struggle persists, right? I mean, Memorial Day has that origin. There were Emancipation Day celebrations in other parts of the country. So watch night services historically, all in it beginning roughly in the same period. So Juneteenth in some ways is sort of like, it's both an actual holiday, it's symbolic, but absolutely it's a sign of a kind of holiday that's always in process, as opposed to this idea that here one and done, freedom came and everything was glorious afterwards. Absolutely not that.
To build off that point too, I mean, to me, embedded in it is this notion of freedom delayed, right? Where if the powers that be have said, the Emancipation Proclamation, the slaves are freed, and then 2.5 years later, that's when it is announced to people in Galveston, and there's a symbolism in that as well, where freedom as written down on paper is not freedom in practice. And that's, I think, what's beautiful, I guess, about Juneteenth being the celebration as opposed to, of course, it being the Emancipation Proclamation Day.
I think that's right. And I think that's also really important because one of the things that we often miss is how integral enslaved people were in their own emancipation. So you only get from 1863 to 1865 because of the vast numbers of Black people who went and joined the Union Army and the Union Navy. And after, especially after Antietam, the impact of their participation in the Civil War was essential. And so it's freedom delayed, and it also is freedom that required people to free themselves.
Mm. Let's talk a little bit about how, we got to how Juneteenth became a holiday, because as a kid, I mean, I don't know if I had gone to high school or junior high in Texas, I would have heard about it as a white kid. I have no idea. I can say as growing up in Massachusetts as a kid, nothing. No. I mean, I frankly, in my, I didn't even heard the word Reconstruction until I went to college, for that matter. But I have a better sense a little bit because I have kids of my own, but granted they're going to, school in New York. So maybe that's a little bit different. I don't know. But there has been a change over the past couple of decades. It feels like in terms of like history and our understanding of that era. Would you give us sort of like, I don't know, intellectual history development of this holiday and that history?
Yeah, I mean, so it is a holiday that is celebrated starting in 1866. It wanes in the late 19th century, but then begins to really pick up in the 60s in Texas, as well as Louisiana, and then some folks out in California, in part because of the way the Great Migration went west from Texas. And it gets a sort of revitalization in the late 20th century. But I didn't celebrate Juneteenth growing up at all. I was aware of Juneteenth programs here and there in Alabama, but really coastal further south. In Massachusetts, we celebrated Emancipation Day. We had Emancipation Day ceremonies, but never Juneteenth. So it's a recent, I think, sort of holiday of national recognition. And I do think, there's in some quarters, some appropriate skepticism of that, certainly from Texans who I know. But I think also it's sort of, there's a way in which it seems too easy particularly in this moment where we're experiencing so much sort of tension and conflict around the politics of race that in some ways it's like, it happened all of a sudden. I was sort of astonished.
It seemed to have come out of nowhere. I mean, even as an adult, like, I'm not even sure, even within the context of this show, which we've been doing for 12, 13 years, I don't think 12 years ago I had ever even heard the word Juneteenth. Right.
So I think the question is sort of how can we keep it from becoming something that is just a sort of empty symbol and actually use it as an occasion, particularly when we're in the midst of the culture wars and the cold civil war that we live in now. How do we allow it to be an occasion to be educated, but also to actually contest the refusal of the study of history and the banning of books and the like?
Well, specifically that, I mean, in this moment of anti-critical race theory being this organizing force for the Republican Party, particularly on a local level, because they want to activate them to vote Republican. And if you're going to your school board and bitching about racism being taught in schools, you're probably going to vote. I mean, just talk about that importance too, because like the fact that this is such a new federal holiday and it's happening in this particular moment is key as well.
It is key. I mean, I think, one of the ways that we might think about it is that in the context, and we can take Florida as always the easy example, but if there is a prohibition on teaching this history, you're actually you have in some ways a kind of federalist crisis, right? A distinction, a sort of fundamental contestation between what is being celebrated on the federal level and what a state is insisting cannot be actually engaged historically at all. So you have from the White House the message, well, this is the second Independence Day, as it were, right? That Juneteenth celebrates the second Independence Day, and then you have at the state level people saying you absolutely cannot learn about this history. It's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, talk about that, the Juneteenth within the context of because we're in an era, right, where we have also followed where a lot of the Confederate statues have come down. Fort Bragg is getting renamed. I mean, it's almost like there's a sort of, I don't know, a mirror image to the 20s in the 1920s or the early 1920s or 19 teens where we've come out of Reconstruction and there's this resurgence of the KKK and all of these memorials start going up and there's an attempt to sort of establish the lost cause and to create a new revision of history. And now we sort of like a decade later, a century later, there is, I guess, the apparatus that controls or has more of a grip around history is like sort of pushing back on that, right? I mean, we're getting rid of the Dunning School as an interpretation of what happened, and but there is a huge blowback to that I don't know if there was a parallel to in those teens, because there wasn't an empowered sort of political force or cultural force at the time to complain about, like, hey, why are you putting up a statue of a Confederate general when, 40 years ago or 60 years ago, they were trying to overthrow the government? Like, what's going on here?
Right. I mean, what's interesting is that this is what, it's a fascinating era. So one of the consequences of digitization is that we have access to sort of vast numbers of Black newspapers from the 1920s. So there's a really robust conversation happening about the evil of the lost cause and the violence behind it, right? And so it's not recognized in the mainstream, but there is the conversation that's happening. And in some ways, the culture wars cycle every 30 years. I am increasingly of the mind that the way that we teach the history is not simply, this should be the master narrative of the nation or the consensus narrative, or that should be, but that it's actually the history, the story is the conflict, right? That there has been this sort of fundamental conflict from the very founding of the nation over who ought to count as citizens, over what the scope of membership is, over the recognition of human rights, of civil rights, and the like, and that's really the story, right? So the lost cause, the sort of the motif, the South shall rise again, repeats itself because we have this core ideological conflict, and that is part of the American story.
So if American history is these sort of like two major competing narratives that at various times and the story of our history is a product of that dynamic at any given time, where one narrative may have more the more cultural, like, what is it that when we look at that dynamic, like, what is it that we're saying that the narrative has? Like, are there components of society that, one narrative has captured for this particular era as opposed to the other narrative? Is it all just simply political power? Is there cultural power to it? I mean, I hate to refer to Charlie Kirk, but this segment we just played so laid out all of these issues, but from, a guy who wasn't quite, I think, conscious of the issues, but sort of reacting to them in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the narratives have beliefs behind them. And there's something instructive that one narrative wants to limit what people know in order to sustain the belief. And the other actually, at best, is encourages deeper investigation, right? And so the sort of anti-intellectualism, the anti-education disposition of the sort of lost cause idea, I think the way that, that those of us who believe in history and believe in truth and justice respond is to say, what are you so afraid of people knowing, right? But I do think, so I think it's political, and I think it has to do with power, but it also has to do with belief systems, right? At a very core level, right? And not just, we bandy about words like democracy, but the idea is what I think behind is what's the precondition for democracy, right? And the precondition for democracy is on a certain level, this question of who do you believe gets to participate, right? What are the conditions of participation? It's not just democracy isn't just the procedure, right? It's actually how do we get to the voting booth or whatever, or what have you, or the table, as it were. And so, so I think it's a combination in many ways of all of the things that you said.
I feel that it's immensely important that moments like this act as mythbusters too, because so much of like the white power structure wants to mythologize like the founding of this nation. It's the whole 1776 project nonsense, revisionist history, and why I feel this is, a more opportune moment than, say, Martin Luther King Day, where I feel like a massive section of the population has deified or like defanged him as well at the same time. This is much more of an opportunity to analyze that conflict that you describe and the ongoing nature of it, as opposed to presenting a figurehead and then saying, well, this person solved this, and then, okay, let's wash our hands of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that's right, to the extent that, because Juneteenth is new, it becomes an occasion to have a debate around it. I am also of the mind of, telling the truth about Dr. King and using, I think, and it's a really wonderful example that you give, though, because the way that he gets mythologized and actually defanged is by the taking of a sound bite. And I think similarly, the way that there are some folks talk about Juneteenth, as though it has no political content, has the potential of having that same kind of, kind of flattening of the legacy. And so, I do believe we can have this discussion around Juneteenth, and I hope that it encourages us to actually reevaluate all of the holidays, right? Reevaluate the Federalist Papers, it becomes an occasion to think differently about our past.
What is the way to sort of like maximize that utility? I mean, Charlie Kirk called this a neo-segregationist holiday. And that it was, I mean, the thing is, though, the way that he approached it was really fascinating to me, because he said it was meant to undercut July 4th. And I think on a sort of like an ideological, like intellectual level, that's an interesting sort of like thing to discuss, because Frederick Douglass's famous speech about like, this is not, it's Independence Day, but it's not. But then he sort of turned it into, just because of its close proximity in time to July 4th, that instead of it being sort of like a way to undercut the, to make July 4th more of a process day than a sort of, this is when we got, our liberation. But how, so on some level, I think like he's helping the utility of Juneteenth to, essentially make Americans look into their history and understand their country more. I don't think he meant to do that, but for those who don't perceive it as a neo-segregationist holiday, but rather one about, have a more nuanced and an ability, to have an awareness of what this country was sort of founded on and how long of a process it's been, and we're not there yet. I mean, how do we leverage that utility?
I mean, I think that you just offered a perfect example. Growing up, I was expected to read What to the Slave is the 4th of July, right? And the idea that and Independence Day, the 4th of July was a widely celebrated holiday in Black communities. Any day that's a day off for people who are hardworking is a widely celebrated holiday. And also, at least in the South, there was a kind of defiant patriotism that was associated with the 4th of July, right? And so, I mean, I think telling that story, right, of freedom, the founding of the nation is both a slave on the principles of liberty, but as a slave nation is an important lesson, right? And then to read, I mean, you could actually tell a story reading through the history of the antebellum South. You could tell a story you start with the Revolutionary War and about Black soldiers for British loyalists who were emancipated because they fought on the side of the crown. And some of whom went to England. You can talk about Crispus Attucks, and then you can talk about Frederick Douglass. Then you can actually sort of tell the story that takes us through the building of the wealth of the nation through cotton, right? And the expansion of slavery and the Indian removal, and then come to Juneteenth, right? And even then, it's a protracted struggle. But I do think that we actually should expect, whether it's part of history education or civics education, for people to understand the making of the nation without romance, but with some sort of really important signposts about what these principles actually mean. The 14th Amendment is huge in our sort of day-to-day lives, but we don't tend to know, right, how we got there. Right, that kind of robust citizenship actually comes through the Civil War.
How much does in your estimation, does class and just capitalism play within that narrative over the years? I mean, and how much of it do you see? that there is an attempt or a failure to an attempt to decouple those ideas or a failure to connect those ideas?
Both. How much time do we have?
Really, a lot of time.
Capitalism in class is everywhere. It's both in the history, not just of the exploitation, of Black labor, but in the exploitation of white labor and the use of race as, and Du Bois talked about this, the wages of whiteness is the one sort of for poor and working class white Americans, the one thing they had in this culture that actually, not only dissociated poor and working class people from each other on the basis of race, but actually set up a logic of competition so that you have some of the most sort of impassioned defenders of the logic of white supremacy being people who are relatively vulnerable because of a fear that if they lose the benefits of whiteness, they have nothing in a society that is so profoundly unequal. To me, and this is part of what I tried to write about in South to America, that also has to be told as part of the story, right? That it is not enough to, and in some ways it's cruel to just point a finger at, the poor and working class white Southerner and say, well, see, they're the racists, without realizing that was actually the seduction that to keep them away from advocating from class interests often. So, it has a lot to do with, and this is part of why I also think we should be learning about the mining wars as part of the history of this country. We fail on working class history too.
Why do you think that there's been, and the Alabama, where I would say is the sort of the pivot point maybe of your book. Why do you think there has been such a failure over time, or maybe failure is the wrong word? Why has it been so unsuccessful in creating a broader awareness of that concept of the wages of whiteness and how it's been used in the context of exploitation? Like, we had, I cannot remember the author's name now, but Hammer and Hoe, was it
Robin Kelly?
Yeah, we had Robin on to discuss that book, and obviously it looks at Alabama, and it looks like the sort of like attempt to sort of create a solidarity amongst the white and Black working class. What has to happen before that sort of concept, or what hasn't happened, or why has it still today so easy for conservative, reactionary, revanchist, whatever you want to call them, forces to exploit that?
I think the easiest way to answer, and of course it's not an easy answer, but is that race is so deeply embedded in the logic and the patterns of behavior and the habits of Americans that it can be deployed at the blink of an eye. And it becomes very hard to overcome. And then that combined with, in the current political economy, in the context of sort of late capitalism and neoliberalism, where there's virtually no safety net, where there is a sort of competitive logic, everything is marketized, people are really terrified of giving up even the most modest advantage that they might have. And so even the sort of minutia of stratification, and I think this is across the board, people clutch on to. We see some powerful counterexamples, though, with the growing sort of labor movement. So I don't want to diminish that, because I think it's a very exciting turn in this country. And as this sort of labor movement emerges, they are heavily multiracial groups of people. And so hopefully, I guess we should try to invest in those moments, and perhaps by emphasizing the history, right, we give sort of fuel to those growing movements.
Well, it's fascinating stuff, and I guess it's just going to be ongoing, and I guess we'll, maybe 10 years into the celebration of Juneteenth, we'll have a better notion of because it could go both ways, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
It could just end up being, I don't know, like most of our holidays where it's just Juneteenth sale and
excuse to drink or
this
something.
Is appliances, and
right.
It just, that's when we freed the slaves, and we're done.
Well, it will almost certainly be that. And then the question will be, will those of us who want it to be more, will we do something, right? It'll certainly be that. We see it already. There's lots of Juneteenth sales. But the question is, what is our responsibility in the face of our present moment and our really extremely painful history?
Imani Perry, professor of African American Studies at Princeton University. We'll put a link to South to America, A Journey Below the Mason-Dixon to understand the soul of a nation. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
All right, folks. Going to take a little break. Head into the fun half of the program. We will take your phone calls. We will take your IMs. And just a reminder, it is your support that makes the show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free part of the program, free of commercials, but you also get to the fun half. And also, during the live show, you can use the app to IM the fun half of the program. JustCoffee.coop, Fred Trade Coffee, Tea, or Chocolate, coupon code Majority. Don't forget the Discord, MajorityDiscord.com. Almost 9,000. I think we're probably at 9,000 members of our Discord now.
Wow.
It's like a small city. And
that's bigger than most towns in North Dakota, all but like maybe 15.
There you go. We could just move the Discord, maybe take over the entire state.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to build housing for that many people on such short notice, but we'll give it a shot.
Small, tiny houses. We'll live in a bunch of tiny homes.
This sounds like a dystopia.
Yeah, I saw some of those on Airbnb. I feel like people just go to them for an Instagram aesthetic.
Yes.
It's like, why is it $600 a night for a tiny home in the middle of the woods?
You don't want a tiny home in North Dakota in the winter because you got to be inside for a lot.
We just need to, we'll have it on closed circuit. The Majority Report would just be playing over and over again every day.
Our interview with our 215 interviews with libertarians.
Exactly. Exactly. Also, don't forget AM Quickie, amquickie.com. Head over there, sign up for the AM Quickie. You'll get 3 newsletters a week for free. Top stories of the day, of the week. And then you can sign up to get it 5 days a week.
A bunch of people are excited because they thought that was a pre-recorded interview, and now they realize we're live.
Oh, they thought that was
I
pre-recorded?
thought we had the day off and pre-recorded that, but actually, no, we're here, folks. Looking for you.
Have we pre-recorded in the past?
Not for Juneteenth.
But now it's a federal holiday.
Well, but the thing is, it's like it's a new holiday and trying to get, people to know what's going on.
Right.
I got to figure out, when we get to take it off.
You mean, right.
When we get to take it off.
When we get to take it off.
So most of my friends have today off, I just got to say, and then I was like, oh, I'm coming in, I have work, and they were like, your job has work? I was
it's people don't know enough about the holiday.
I know. Well,
and it's too good of an idea. But maybe what we should do is just do the Juneteenth interview on the Friday before or on the Tuesday after or whatever, the day after, and take it off.
And play it as if it's live.
Just something to think about for next year.
Yeah. All right. Noted. Put down. Emma.
Yeah.
ESPN. You guys taking Juneteenth off?
No, we're not.
What? Why not?
Emma's a bad boss, too.
I guess so. I guess the poison drips through, as they say.
Yeah.
So we'll be talking about the...
And we're going to take off 3 days for July 4th.
I know.
Yeah, we're doing Charlie Kirk proud. Actually, we're
we're just giving you a little bit of crap, but I don't care that much. We do have a nice July 4th time off. So, Also, on ESPN, we'll be speaking about Bradley Beal going to Phoenix. More NBA conversation ahead of both the draft next week and then free agency at the end of the month. Matt highlighted this amazing Dwayne Wade interview that I want to play on the show about his experience being the father of a trans kid. And also Rob Manfred stepping in crap with the Oakland A's and how disgusting the entire debacle is. YouTube.com/ESPN show.
V says, wait a minute, didn't you guys take off Juneteenth last year? Did we?
No.
It was on a weekend, I believe.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, yeah, okay. That explains it.
Yeah.
Matt!
Left for Reckoning, we did a Sunday show where we talked, well, David did a little bit of a reclamation of a radical country history. And we also talked about UPS's union strike authorization and the DOJ's report on Minneapolis's racist cops. So you'll be surprised to learn that they're petulant and lawless in a sustained way that, when you talk about, oh yeah, we've made steps forward and we're working to partner. No, they've absolutely, to name one thing, they just stopped the day after they murdered George Floyd, basically gathering race and I believe gender-related data. So we're not going to gather that on stop. So all the DOJ's info into how racist the Minneapolis Police Department was collected with the obstruction of the actual department that continues to this day.
In one report, they supposedly maced an unarmed person that they were monitoring or tailing with no preconceived reason for doing so, with a DOJ monitor in their car.
I read that. That's nuts.
It's unbelievable.
What do you mean we're not allowed to do it? It's just...
We're at work. We're just doing our jobs.
Yeah, it's crazy.
All right, let's take a quick break. We're going to go short today.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Should I have done ESPN on Tuesday?
Yeah. I can't believe you're doing it.
It's pretty horrible. Yeah. I mean, me and Sam were talking about it earlier.
I mean, now
I really.
Bradley marches out.
I can't believe she's making Bradley come to work.
Yeah, Bradley marches out of the studio.
All right. Well, I guess stay tuned. I'm going to think about it.
Nice.
646-257-3920 is the number. See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabs.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey Sam, hey Andy, you guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way. Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up.
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
we are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland, Majority Report, Juneteenth, calling into the phone machine. Yada, 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 half expecting to come back from this break to an empty studio. Worker strike, workout. Kowalski from Nebraska. Howdy, Emma Majority Report. Happy Juneteenth. I plan to desecrate the grave of Robert E. Lee and his horse traveler. Pleasantries aside, Sam, can you please ask the Council of Jews in charge of the weather satellites to help out the Great Plain Gentiles? Please have mercy on us. It is too dry.
Seems like that trip.
I'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
I'll see what we can do.
Looks like that trip to the mountains was good for Kowalski's mental health.
Yeah. Eddie Munster, USPS is delivering Amazon. Tack thumb. Slavery still exists in this country if you commit a crime. Tim Pool's economics researcher. Very unsurprising that Josh Hawley has no idea what's happening in Mauritania. DNC Google pundit with all the people bitching about gas stoves. Yeah, it's nice to see the flame. But I have to say, my cheap electric stove cooks far, far more evenly and consistently than any gas stove I've ever used. It's just a fact based on my experience.
I don't like, I too prefer gas stoves just because I don't know, the electric stove, I just am not used to it, but I'm going to do away with it if it's harming I'm not going to have it pried from my cold dead hands, is whatever Republicans are saying. What are you saying?
You also don't like roundabouts, so you're kind of stuck in the past.
Well,
I find electric stoves to be...
I like straightforward things, so... Clearly. Yeah.
I think the idea is that gas stoves tend to be consistent regardless of the quality of the stove.
Yes.
Because it's just a flame at the end of the day.
Easy mode.
If you get a mid-level electric stove, I think they're awesome.
Have you ever burned yourself on an electric stove, though?
Have I ever burned I've burned myself on...
Yeah,
just about everything.
It's easier to burn yourself on an electric stove too. Also,
well, yes, because you see the flame.
Hot.
But
yeah, well,
have you ever had an oil fire on your gas stove?
Oh, I got a funny story about
that. That is
really.
I've
never had that.
That is no fun. The point is that people can make different assessments as to whether a gas stove is better than a electric stove, vice versa, for these sort of very specific, because I know that America is full of really high quality chefs and everyone and they're all concerned about their getting the freshest ingredients and et cetera in their cooking.
When they're not going to Applebee's, they love to do
inductive is that what it is? Inductive stoves. Those are the ones that apparently chefs are saying are the best now, which are also like a form of electric stove. But this is just a reality. Now, I know this is going to be very upsetting to Jordan Peterson. I think, in fact, he tweeted about this.
Oh, he's upset? Usually he's just the vision of stoicism.
There was, you remember that this whole thing about gas stoves came up because there was another study. And there's been apparently many, many studies over the years. But there was a study published in December that estimated about 13% of childhood asthma in the United States was linked to gas burning stoves. There's apparently more problems associated with gas stoves than, and researchers are finding out new ones all the time. There were researchers at Stanford's Doerr School of Sustainability. They measured benzene emissions from stoves at 87 homes in California and Colorado and found that natural gas and propane stoves emitted benzene, which frequently reached indoor concentrations above the health benchmarks set by the World Health Organization and other public agencies. In about a third of the homes, a single gas burner on high or an oven set to 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 45 minutes. Now, cooking something at 350 degrees for 45 minutes, I mean, that's like, I don't know, baked potatoes. That's, I think chicken, you even got to go like 4.25 for at least 45 minutes, depending on how much chicken. I mean, that is a fairly typical thing to do. Raise benzene levels above the upper range of indoor concentrations seen in secondhand tobacco smoke. They noted that similar concentrations, when identified in 2020 near schools in Greater Los Angeles and the Colorado Front Range, led to investigations by authorities there.
Jesus.
The lead author of the study said, I found it startling that concentrations were enough to trigger a public outcry when they were detected outside are concentrations we found repeatedly inside, just from stoves in people's homes. And this is the gas stoves also emit other apparently pollutants like nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, and formaldehyde. They can also leak methane even when they're turned off. This has nothing to do with that. This is just a distinct danger. The UN International Agency for Research on Cancer and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency define benzene as a human carcinogen. Breathing in the chemical can increase the risk of leukemia and lymphoma. Doctors say no level of exposure is safe. And here's the thing. They found this in single-family homes, which, if you've ever lived in a single-family home, you'll know is larger than the majority of apartments that exist. I can tell you that, like, my apartment is probably about half of like a small, typical single-family home.
Yeah.
And they, the pollutants travel throughout the home and linger there. I mean, so these things are dangerous, and it took us a long time to figure it out, just like we did
with lead.
With lead or
lead paint, yeah.
With mercury or whatnot. And the fascinating thing is you have right-wingers out there now sort of like glomming on, and not just right-wingers exclusively, but glomming on to the idea that, like, the vaccines are harming children and whatnot, but they're talking about, you're going to have to pry my gas stove out of my cold dead fingers type of situation. Here is direct, non-contradicted evidence. I mean, it never occurred to me that, like, oh, wait a second, like, I've driven down 95 and seen the flames coming from factories in New Jersey, with all due respect, Emma, burning, thinking like, that can't be good.
No.
Like, openly burning fuel into the atmosphere, that can't be good. Never occurred to me, like, why would it be good indoors to do that? It's just gas that's being burned.
It's not. I mean, that's why you don't run the car with the garage door closed too, right? Yeah. I mean, like.
But this is, now we're getting increased evidence, and the response to this is, it's one thing to say we're going to try and diminish society's health and public health. To roll back on scant evidence of danger provided by vaccines. But it's another to say that you're going to, try and prevent kids from having asthma in these buildings. Forget about that.
Yeah, I mean, then it just shows that they're not concerned about health effects of these kinds of things when they're made into culture war issues. It's just anti-intellectualism, and it boils down to, well, the experts said it, but I want an alternative vision, and so screw you, daddy, right? Screw you, authority. It's silly. It's just insanity.
Also, it like the way our media covers this, it skews towards higher income people who are more empowered over what kind of appliances they have, and unlike renters who just have to put up with it.
I have a gas stove in my 1-bedroom apartment. I couldn't make that decision. I couldn't make that choice, right? Renters don't have the renters. The idea that their freedom would be exercised via what products they put in their apartment. I mean, it's just laughable. What was that Republican congressman who you hate, who we played on Thursday?
Glenn Grothman,
who was saying that this is not going to hurt the poor because they don't pay their bills anyway. No, but it is going to hurt more poor people because gas stoves are more likely to be in smaller space, or the effects are going to be more acute in smaller spaces like apartments, renters.
Yeah, he said that the Hollywood class and the welfare class did not care about their energy bill or their gas bill, but the middle class does.
That's a fancy way of saying landlords should be able to gas slowly their tenants and not make the government feel sad about it.
Yep.
Let's move on to another complete disregard for humanity. This one brought to you by Fox's Jesse Waters. He's come up with a plan to deal with people who are unhoused.
Oh, great.
Gavin's now at maybe midfield, but he has to understand homelessness isn't about lack of affordable housing.
I'll pause it for 1 second. We should say that the right wing is really uptight about Gavin Newsom because he embarrassed, I guess, Sean Hannity the other night on his program. And they are anticipating, maybe a 2028 matchup or the potential that, who knows? I don't know what the percentage is of Joe Biden actually being the nominee in 2024, all things considered. But if there's a 5% chance that he won't be, Gavin Newsom is going to attempt to be that person, or, one of the people attempting to do that person. And so here's Jesse Waters carrying the water for a guy named Michael Schellenberger, who we see on Twitter promoting a some type of don't censor us movement that you got to buy tickets to and go to a live show in London. That's the way this movement is starting. But he also is famous for saying that housing's not going to help people who are unhoused.
Yeah.
Coercion and force.
Right. So food is not going to help people who are hungry. Water is not going to help people who are thirsty. And homes are not going to help people who are without homes.
And here's Jesse Waters.
It must just be about their personal pathology.
Gavin's now at maybe midfield, but he has to understand homelessness isn't about lack of affordable housing. It's about drug addicts that want to wander around and live in tents on the sidewalk. And so you can't coddle antisocial behavior. You can't subsidize antisocial behavior. You have to stigmatize it. You can't celebrate people with purple hair, with nose rings, 4 kids with 4 different men who are dressed like trash, and make them out to be some sort of cutting-edge heroes. You have to call them what they are. These are people that have failed in life, and they're on their deathbed. And if we're not honest about it, we're never going to fix this problem.
First off, if what he was saying was true, now it is the case that there may be significant drug or substance abuse problems. And it is the case that there may be, some significant mental health problems. Yeah. Some of which could have been present prior to them losing housing. Many of which developed surely because, you need to cope with not having any place to live. But even if we were to stipulate that what he's saying is true, that these are all just people who want to be out on the street, roaming around, living in tents. Yeah. What makes him think that stigmatizing them is going to in any way
shame?
Right. We can shame them on top of all this. I mean, the bottom line is, regardless of how much you think substance abuse or mental health plays into the question of homelessness in this country, the primary vehicle or the easiest way to begin to address that and provide services to address those issues is if someone has an address and they have the ability to return there every night. And we've seen this. I mean, it is...
in Houston, they experimented with Housing First programs starting in 2011. They have cut the number of homeless people in Houston by 63% since that time period. We had someone from the program, and I'm blanking on the name of it.
It was the Houston Housing Coalition.
Houston Housing Coalition, back earlier on when I started. So it's just factually incorrect.
Yeah, it's a public housing, or it's a public health issue, not, a issue that can be dealt with shame or cops, which is like kind of what Waters doesn't want to say. But also, like, what's cheaper than rent and like long-term mental health care is drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, there are a lot of people who fall into that kind of situation who, because of the increase in the incredible desperation that they feel by being unhoused, sometimes fall into drugs when they previously weren't using drugs, because sometimes it's like the only way you get to sleep at night, and you are in an incredibly anxious and precarious mental health situation and financial one. And the idea, I mean, I wish Jesse Waters would I know he never would have a conversation with someone who was unhoused, because I don't think they'd say that they feel warm and cozy about being on the street. I'd imagine because we live in a capitalist society that a lot of them do feel a ton of internalized shame, a ton of it already, because of that mentality that he puts out there. Like, they just need a little bit more shame. What would that do?
Yeah, it's not just about housing prices. Like, we do need a whole bunch of holistic things to care about people. Like we said, like long-term mental health. But like, the addiction is a public health issue. But this is just an apology for rentiers who control the housing stock and every community in this country.
And it's also, though, it also is a way to make sure, because the fact is that if you were to provide housing, low-cost housing, no-cost housing, for people who are, suffering from homelessness, it is to them, and it is, frankly, a slippery slope to having to provide other services if that is what your agenda is. There's really, it's binary in the sense that we're either going to commit ourselves to dealing with these problems, or we're going to commit ourselves to saying these people are subhuman and don't have really, it is not worth our effort. And the way that you do that is to, of course, to say that they're, life's losers or whatever it was that Waters is going on there. And understand the nuanced versions of these, they fall on that binary too. It's just that they're just not as explicit about being in the Waters camp. But once you say there is no sort of like, that providing services and housing to these people is not going to be effective, you're essentially on that other side of the binary. I have no doubt that there are folks who are homeless, either in part because they had, some form of mental illness, or have developed more severe mental illness because they're on the streets and it's being untreated, and there's no mechanism to treat them because you don't even know where they are night to night.
And the stress of being on the street exacerbates mental health conditions.
Without a doubt. And that they may not even be in a position to make the choices that would get them help at this stage.
Yeah.
And that is a, that is a dilemma, I think, that we have yet to reckon with. But that cohort of people who are homeless is, it's certainly not the majority. And even if it was 51%, we need to address the 49%, in that instance. Like, it does not diminish the idea that there are people who just could not afford it, or, ran into some substance abuse problem and then could not afford it, or whatever it is. We are either going to address this problem and address all of the people that we can help immediately and easily, the 60 some odd percent who were helped by Houston's program. And then we can address what we do with the 40%. But if we use that know, 40% as a cudgel to not provide, you know, resources and help for the 60%.
Rent
this
relief.
is what we're going to get. Yeah.
I mean, and it's everybody. I can't, like, this is a very wide spread issue. It's not just houseless people that suffer from the impossibility of paying rent in this country. And like, this is just Waters is obscuring, demonizing homeless people, the actual culprits of this.
And it's not just houseless people that experience addiction. Like, if
you just don't notice it when people are in their houses.
Yeah, right. If Rush Limbaugh, or you know, if Jesse Waters, his theory was correct, Rush Limbaugh would have been out on the streets because he was addicted to drugs at that point in his life. But he's rich, so he can hide it.
Let's go to the IMs. Apologies if this is a repeat. My signal's pretty spotty, but may I have a shofar for my birthday on Saturday? This is from Charlie Her.
Oh, yes. We also need one for Gemma Giraffe. I don't know if that's the same person, but Gemma Giraffe asked for one in the YouTube chat.
37 years old, 1.5 on HRT, and I barely look 24. Turns out the key to eternal youth was microplastics. On a serious note, I woke up to a Reddit post from someone who may have overheard a planned mass shooting at a Pride event in Gatlinburg, not sure which state. Last I saw, they got the guy's picture and were contacting authorities. This is why there's no straight Pride and why I'm not celebrating July 4th this year. Stay safe and proud y'all left his best. Sorry. I'm sorry. This is for your birthday, but I'm sorry. You know, somebody don't generally do this because we don't even have the capacity to do this, frankly. But somebody online had posted a clip from this show from, I guess it was a year ago. Twitter user Jeff the Leftist. The only reason why I'm doing this is, I mean, obviously I love to make myself feel like I know what I'm talking about, but really more importantly, it is so obvious what was going on a year ago. It is so obvious what's going on today. It's going to be obvious where it's going a year from now. The right used trans people as a way of relitigating the culture war of the aughts and triggering the fundamentalists in this country and those who have adopted a fundamentalist set of principles without even maybe knowing that it comes from fundamentalism in terms of like their ideas of gender roles and the patriarchy and all of these things and the ickiness factor. This is a clip from user Jeff the Leftist in response to a Gallup poll showing a 15% drop in put up the poll, a 15% drop in Republicans' view of same-sex marriage as moral, just in the course goes from like what 2022 to now.
2002 to 2022.
56%.
No, but the drop.
Oh, yeah, sorry, the drop.
You can see that in red.
Yeah.
All the way to the right. It falls off a cliff.
15-point drop.
And I mean, we even see it in the context of Democrats dropping, I guess, a couple of points to 79. But there was a 15% drop in Republicans. And this was so obvious that even I, a year ago, predicted it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
The conservative movement has not changed in 40 years. The ideology has not changed because it barely exists beyond some very basic tenets in terms of like the way they want to maintain a class. At different times, they have found it advantageous to push one agenda or another agenda. In different times, they have found it more tactically advantageous to keep their powder dry. I can guarantee you that if you look at acceptance of gays in the Republican Party right now, and maybe some variant in terms of younger people, but I can guarantee you that acceptance of gays is starting to go down in the Republican Party. And it will go down even more. And it's not that the mentality of the Republican Party has changed as much as the leadership of the party knows that this was always latent. They didn't hype it when Obergefell passed. But the moment they have the opportunity, they deploy this again. And you will watch the Republican voter just snap into line. They did it. I mean, like, they didn't give up on deficits. It was always BS to begin with. They just stopped pushing it. And so then the Republican Party didn't care. They don't care about inflation, or you'd see them, every single one of them voting against giving, tens of billions of dollars to Ukraine. Because I got news for you. The money that goes to Ukraine, guess where it gets spent? It gets spent in this country. So there it is. I mean, we're already at 2012, I think, levels practically. And snap in line. That line just like literally drops off like a cliff. I mean, we're not quite at 2012, but we've got a little bit of time. But this is what's going on. People should just be aware of this. Yeah, pop this up again. Just be aware of what is going on here. This is not like suddenly the country, realized like we have got to save the integrity of a couple of different types of women's sports. This is the, it's not like it's even more ridiculous, frankly, than the arguments of like, we've got to invade Afghanistan because of what's happening with women's rights there.
Yeah, right.
I mean, at least in the context of Afghanistan, the predicate was largely true. Whether that was a genuine motivation for us to go to war is obviously BS. But in this context, not only is there a complete insincerity in the concern for women's sports, but also, there's really not a threat to women's sports.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
And, but it has been successful in undermining in a year by 15% the gains in acceptance of gay and lesbian relations over the course of a decade. And they did it in months. They did it in months. And it ain't going away, folks. They're going to bring this down to, they're going to get it down to, and you can see that dip, put that thing back up, 2004. That's right. That is right where George W. Bush got on national television and said, we have to make gay people second-class citizens, and we have to ensconce it in the Constitution.
He set it back basically 8 years till it reached that point again in favorability.
And let's not kid ourselves either. How long were we told that Roe v. Wade was settled law, and that another thing you could do a victory lap on is that what did Jimmy say? The moon would fall into Lake Michigan. Or was that related to Roe v. Wade? I forget. But either way, that was a right. That was a right that was given to the American public by the courts, and they could attack same-sex marriage once again. I mean, luckily, Biden did pass that bill, right, a few months ago, protecting same-sex marriage, but it still could come under attack in a variety of ways.
I mean, it would come under attack in the context of it could come under the attack in terms of the context of like, well, you can't federally mandate what states do.
Yep.
But it also is just going to be used as leverage in their culture war.
Yeah.
And their culture war is turned into, like what are the political policies that the Republican Party wants? Well, I mean, what are they? Tax cuts?
Yeah, tax cuts.
Yeah.
Poison stuff.
Guns, pistol stocks. And protection of gas stoves.
Yep, and fear.
That's the agenda. That's what they're passing right now.
Yeah.
Like they have like a House. Everything they pass in the House is, basically, and they know it won't even. They know it won't even necessarily become law. So it is the perfect opportunity for them to express their agenda and for us to understand it.
It's a laboratory for bigotry.
And
their
what
agenda.
is it they're passing?
No,
Literally
yeah.
gun stocks and defense of poisoning children in apartment bill. I don't think that's what they call it. They call it something about their gas stoves. The Earl of Grey. Charlie's looking a little sleepy today, like he's normally pretty high energy. Maybe he missed his cup of meth this morning. Cosmopolitics. My birthday is a competitor for Columbus Day. Antifa's sub-commander. Charlie Kirk didn't complain about moving Labor Day because too many commies celebrated. Always projection. My brain hurts. Dear God, save us from religious people. Level 3 bureaucrat. Shake my damn head. A self-professed capitalist suddenly hate the free market when it's their holiday being outcompeted. Edit 1977. Charlie Kirk can blame Hallmark for the over-celebrating of ideas. Wonderbreader. The left has gone too far with the war on July 4th. What now? Why are we focusing on Ukrainian independence when we should be focusing on our own independence here? Can't even say Happy Independence Day anymore or even celebrate it in primary schools now.
Yeah.
Majority Report, wardrobe coordinator. Why are they so obsessed with rituals? Excuse me for a judgment. I pledge allegiance to the flag. Sam's oral fixation. This is a conspiracy by Texas to undercut the 4th of July for the Confederacy by ending slavery, specifically in the summary. Emma, you don't get it. Much like cutting taxes for rich people, there's a sweet spot you hit with shaming where everything conservatives want finally works. We just got to keep doing the not working thing until it proves them finally right.
Good point.
Between the 101 and the 5, I might argue that it's a class struggle that's associated with the development of chattel slavery alongside the development of capitalism and colonialism, imperialism that is pushing these false polarities within our culture that keep cropping up. Well, maybe in part, from my perspective. Induction stoves are actually the best, apparently, yes. Gageson. Simple solution. Don't celebrate the 4th of July on June 19th and don't celebrate Juneteenth on the 4th of July. Tomuff Link, happy Fun Day Monday, folks. Here in Britain, official report released last week concluded that Boris Johnson misled Parliament over the illegal parties that he held in the Prime Minister's official residence while the public were obeying Johnson's lockdown laws. Of course, the lockdowns were necessary, but how can compliance be expected after that? Now, I agree. I mean, there's nothing more reprehensible to me than public officials doing this type of thing. And undercutting. I don't find it to be any type of like sacrifice you have to make if you're in that position. It's just wrong. It's just, and it's more reprehensible than like than other things because so much of public health policy is reliant on trust. I find it just disgusting. Johnson resigned almost 2 weeks ago after reading a preliminary copy of the report. Today, the official inquiry into Britain's response to COVID began. And on the weekend, another video of Tories shitting on their own lockdown laws leaked. Also, I'm serious about DeSantis going on the radio to say this country is at war with wokeness. He's absolutely going to do that. He's done it, hasn't he? We're
that's all he says.
We're going to fight the war on woke here and fight the war on woke there.
We're going to force feed the combatants Ensure until they tell us the truth about the war on woke.
It's a war on the truth. So we have to fight the war on the woke.
Can I share a bit of reading I did over the weekend?
Please.
Revolution and Reaction, 1848 and the Second French Revolution. I was reading just to escape from, the concerns of the present. Conservatives, quote, conservatives generally established a more simple connection between education and politicization, with evidence of the activity of the relatively few primary school teachers who became active Republican militants before their eyes. They tended to see the existing system of primary education as a threat to society. Teachers were accused of spreading socialism instead of preaching resignation to God's will. Once universal male suffrage had been recognized, the significance of the instituteur teacher seemed greatly enlarged. Carnot, the Minister of Education in the provisional government, had proposed to establish free and obligatory education, and every statement by the left on education appeared to confirm conservative fears that a struggle to control the minds of the young was underway. Although most teachers were already dominated by the local authorities and behaved with respectful deference toward priest and mayor, even bourgeois anti-clericals now felt the need to intensify control and to ensure that sound moral and religious principles were taught. So just, the ancient past.
Holtenheim. The majority report blend is pretty good. a little more floral than I personally like, but that's more of a function of it being a medium roast rather than dark. Very good quality, and I recommend the Co-op to anyone who comes over the house these days.
Nice.
Thank you. What should we? Is there something we should get on over here?
I mean, we didn't get to that Taibbi thing from Saturday, Friday, but maybe not. Or we could just dive right into the RFK stuff, which is going to take us a while.
Yeah, we should do that. RFK Jr. Bobby Kennedy was on Joe Rogan's show the other day, and apparently has, when he launched his campaign, he was pretty explicit in some circles that he didn't want to get into doing the anti-vax stuff. He didn't want that to lead his campaign. Apparently, he couldn't help himself with Rogan. I mean, maybe it was just too enticing. Rogan was too excited about it. The worst part about this, ultimately, it seems to me, was that that guy, what's his name, Peter Hotez, is that it? Who maybe you saw on TV during COVID. This guy runs an organization that developed a patent-free vaccination for COVID that was distributed to low-income countries around the world.
So incredibly anti-big pharma. There could not be a more anti-big pharma action taken, because you are undercutting their intellectual property chokehold over vaccines, which is not what, given the fact that particularly Operation Warp Speed was funded by the government, it should have been public property, and it wasn't. So this is a thumb in the eye, or whatever the phrase is.
And that's what we should have been talking
Yes.
about the entire time, that anti-vax lunatics wanted to tell us that actually it was a big conspiracy to kill your kids.
I mean, I think that all of the skepticism of pharmaceutical companies is warranted, and we should be skeptical. And in fact, I think the best way to deal with this stuff is to have a very robust program of government manufacturing of a lot of these drugs, vaccinations, and a patent reform, so that the ability of pharmaceutical companies, and even like whatever the sort of like second tier pharmaceutical companies, ones who just buy the patents and then just sort of like jack up the price, is inhibited. However, the idea that you go after somebody who is making a vaccine that completely undercuts the reason why you have skepticism in vaccine in the first place sort of lays bare that there's something else going on here.
But it's not about the corporate profit-seeking nature of big pharma. Now we're talking about an undercutting of public health and medicine more broadly.
Here is clip number 4. This is RFK claiming that ivermectin was suppressed by the pharmaceutical industry during COVID, so that COVID vaccines could have an easier time gaining emergency authorization.
Ivermectin, also made by Big Pharma.
Now, of course, ivermectin is cheaper. Plenty of people prescribed it because there was a shortage of ivermectin, which is used, for things like if you have a parasite, or, if your animal has a parasite. Mm-hmm. So we have plenty of data on how effective ivermectin was. And the answer is not.
Yeah, and the relative cheapness of ivermectin can be overstated too, because if you took it prophylactically, like one of Joe Rogan's quacks, Brett Weinstein said, lied, or I guess just said without any evidence, that it was 100%, near 100% useful as a prophylactic. If people would have been on a regimen of ivermectin monthly, that would have been like, I don't know, 20 more than you pay for streaming services a month for pharmaceutical products.
Definitely more than you would pay for the government funded vaccine, which was free for people.
All right, let's hear this clip number 4.
They had to discredit ivermectin because, because there's a federal law. The federal law, the emergency use authorization statute, says that you cannot issue an emergency use authorization to a vaccine if there is an existing medication that has been approved for any purpose that is demonstrated effective against the target illness. So they had to destroy ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and discredit it, and they had to tell everybody it's not effective, because if they had acknowledged that it's effective in anybody, the whole $200 billion vaccine enterprise would have collapsed.
Pause it. Now, let's be clear. It wasn't $200 billion at that time. I mean, the sequence, I mean, he may be correct. Let's put it this way. If I stipulate that he is correct in regards to what emergency authorization is needed and what situations you need, the sequencing is wrong. These were not, these vaccines were not profitable when they were first released. Johnson & Johnson was shut down, essentially, by the government because of production problems and efficacy issues. So it wasn't, taken for granted that there was going to be profits for any one of these individual companies. The idea that the Trump administration wouldn't have wanted to have basically avoided all of this issue. Remember, the vaccine wasn't even okayed and tried, essentially, until after he lost the election. He could have easily just said, we're going to do ivermectin. But it was somebody in the deep bowels of the government who apparently had bets on which pharmaceutical, because this is what you have to believe. And you have to believe this story. It's easier to reverse engineer this story, but you have to believe that this was somebody's plan at the time.
Yeah.
That there is a vast conspiracy, certainly not just a pharmaceutical company.
And the media.
Not even the pharmaceutical industry. But to test these things, and every single outlet that tested these things, did actual studies.
I would argue
that's what you would have to believe that story.
I would argue, too, that if we're going to start asking questions, I have questions about the continued promotion of drugs like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, again, manufactured by Big Pharma, where people would have to pay out of pocket potentially if they can't get a prescription for it, with that money going directly to Big Pharma. Who is motivating those kinds of talking points when people could have gotten vaccinations that would have prevented the worst of COVID for most people, which was already funded up front by the government? Where is the profit in that scenario that I just laid out versus the one where you're being told that you can purchase miracle cures, again, from Big Pharma to help with COVID?
Yeah,
who's funding Big Pharma more?
This is a pharma critique for people who aren't like anti-capitalist, but who are basically anti-human, who think that people generally are nefarious, and like this guy Hotez or whatever, getting accosted by people who say they're like, independent journalists hunting pedophiles, getting on the front door. It's disgusting. And being unable to be clear about what this is, I think like it's media opportunism for folks. Because you have to believe every one of these doctors is willing to just let people die because of what? Some sort of like Fauci brainwave. He wanted to like poison people with a new concoction. It's absurd, and it leads people into complete like unreality, and that like I don't know, it's incredibly disgusting.
We should also say like the what happened after this was Hotez retweeted a piece in Vice that basically told 100% the truth, which is that Spotify, the company that paid hundreds of millions of dollars, it was $200 million, I think it was, for Joe Rogan to be on their network to generate theoretically hundreds of millions of dollars more for the company overall, pulling people into their sort of the closed ecosystem, is taking absolutely no responsibility for how they are, the stuff that they're disseminating in terms of public health. And I'll tell you, we've gotten criticism for putting ads for nicotine toothpicks. And it is, I don't think that criticism is necessarily, absurd. Okay. I see it as a smoking cessation. I've had experience in quitting smoking And things like these were very helpful to me. But the critique in and of itself, I don't think is unreasonable. You don't want, it is wrong to be making money, in my estimation, off of products that seriously degrade people's health, and more so when it's like it's done under different auspices. Like, I could see people maybe, like advertising alcohol. That's not healthy for you. But the people who drink alcohol have a broad awareness of like the implications of it. Spotify is making hundreds of millions of dollars in part by creating both in real time, wide scale, a diminishment of public health, and long term, God forbid we have another pandemic. Everything that Spotify is doing to make money. Now, listen, Joe Rogan's going to do whatever he does. I mean, the guy's a ding dong. And I'm not letting him off the hook.
He could even tell certain guests that he doesn't want to discuss COVID when he invites them on, and then have other, guests talk about it.
But the corporation, the big media tech corporation known as Spotify, which is making hundreds of millions of dollars off this, has a responsibility to not put out a product that is harming the public welfare. I don't honestly know why there hasn't been a lawsuit here, a liability suit.
It'd be a nice civil suit.
Because there is no doubt that there is a direct diminishment. And I don't know if it's like the family of somebody who died because they were listening to Rogan's sort of like, anti-vax stuff or whatever it is. But it seems to me that there should be some liability here. This is a massive tech corporation making hundreds of millions of dollars off of this garbage.
Yep. And Joe Rogan offering $100,000, which is a fraction of the money that Spotify.
Well, first off, yes, in terms of the debate, then he goes on to say, I'll give you $100,000 for you to come and debate.
Do we have that tweet?
Yeah. To come and debate RFK on my program.
Right.
And first off, Hotez would be a fool, I think, to do this. Why? Because the guy he's a scientist. He is not trained to go onto a podcast. The person who should go onto a podcast is another podcaster.
Is Sam Seder.
RFK is also not trained as a doctor. He's a lawyer.
I mean, even the notion, though, of debating matters of public health is already in and of itself a fanciful notion that only benefits the person who is who wants the debate to happen, because there is no debate.
This is how it goes. Hotez would say there have been many studies that ivermectin is ineffective in treating COVID. And so your whole theory about they had to somehow smear ivermectin as a solution to COVID, incidentally, not just Big Pharma. The Chinese, the Russians, every other country in the world that did not have access to Pfizer and Moderna's vaccines, they also are in on this, right? They're like, China is in on this too, because they could have gotten ivermectin.
And in that longer,
and it would have cost them nothing. But so Hotez would say that, and then Bobby Kennedy would go like, well, no, that's not true. Here's a study that says it is good. And that's the end of the conversation. There is no way for the viewing public to make that assessment. But all of a sudden, people are just going to walk away and say, like, I saw the debate, and Bobby's a much better speaker and much more confident than this scientist who spends his time actually studying and developing the vaccines than the guy whose job it is to go into a courtroom and make an argument.
Yeah.
Or the podcaster whose professional job is to talk into a mic with confidence and make it seem like he has actually done the research and examined these things. There is not a single thing. And the reason why I would go and debate that, because I feel quite confident that I have the ability to bullshit my way through any of that situation in the way that those two guys are bullshitting their ways through the situation. and do it with the same confidence and the same ability to look into the camera without shyness, without feeling intimidated, and say, this is right and that's wrong. Because that's the skill set that's associated with that.
Yeah. And like the idea that like the suppression of media opportunists and charlatans on media is like that is how science gets suppressed. No, like if you actually look at China, it is like disciplinary measures towards actual scientists investigating certain things, right? Like that's the actual thing. Whether Spotify needs to be able to host a litany of charlatans giving horribly damaging, possibly deadly public health advice for a long time, and then, you know, like I said, he's had guests on who he's told, I don't want to talk about that. I want to put it behind him, and like I think it's gross.
No, I mean, he's milking it for engagement, and then we're supposed to say, like, oh, this is the town square, the place where we're supposed to be delineating these ideas. Now, this is a technical subject. This is something that is weighed and poured over by scientists through methodology and through study that is completely incongruous with a podcast debate format. And so, I mean, he should not go on there for that very reason, because like there's also going to be efforts by Rogan or by RFK Jr. essentially to say, well, I don't believe that, and this is like this little logic hole that I can poke into, and you can't. Once they say, I don't agree that the sky is blue, then what are we debating here?
In a longer clip of Rogan and RFK talking about the ivermectin thing, that exact point comes up about the studies. And RFK literally says the people who do studies on ivermectin design them intentionally to fail. And he says they did the same thing with vaccine and autism studies as well.
How do you refute that?
Right.
You can't, exactly.
That's the thing. So you're the scientist. You're the guy who makes the studies to fail. So how can we even trust you? It's
so there you go.
It's self-negating in a cyclical way. It's useless, I think, to an extent.
And there's just like this complete, I would say, inflated self-importance element, and it's also just marketing in media right now, where there is like this belief in that you can debate yourself into some sort of broader understanding on any subject, when in reality, sometimes the debate in and of itself is undercutting public good and facts in and of itself. Because as you say, like when you make everything up for debate as opposed to within the confines of scientific methodology, then that means that there's no foundational reality that we can all agree upon. And so the nature of the debate is also in and of itself what should be pushed back upon. I can't stand this like, frankly, narcissism from certain media members, where it's like, it's just really what we're saying. Just every word that we have to say means something. And the back and forth, the dialogue is where the value is found. It's not really as much of what you say. It's mostly what you cover and what you choose to put into the public sphere of debate more than anything else.
Yeah.
And this is why that would be doing a disservice.
It's gross acting like plugging your Patreon is actually a civic duty that everybody needs.
Yeah.
Well, that's not going to be the end of all that, incidentally.
I mean, Elon Musk weighed in, you know.
Yeah.
So.
And frankly, you know, if I was Hotez, I would be. I mean, he's already been accosted in his home literally that day, right outside, taking out his trash. It seems like.
Yeah.
I don't even know if we should play it.
No.
To give it.
Freak.
And I saw Jimmy Dore saying that he was lying. And
false flag
about that. Yeah, it was a false flag type of situation.
Well, Jimmy Dore's
but Jimmy Dore's, to be fair, Jimmy Dore's producer wrote that tweet.
Oh, gotcha. And he's been fired.
Yeah,
and he's been fired.
Yeah. Well, if the public understood actually the impact of the significance of their messaging on COVID, whether it's Rogan talking about the prophylactic ivermectin, 100%. Those guys would have a tough time paying their mortgages because people would be really upset with how they killed family members.
You should take lots of prophylactic usage of things that for Rogan's benefit, including the like brain force or whatever the hell he sells on his website. Like he undercuts public health by constantly promoting alternative solutions that coincidentally enrich themselves, where you can pay $60 out of pocket for some unregulated supplement and then really feel like you're ahead of the curve in a country that puts you on an island with your healthcare. You just got you're screwed.
Yeah.
It's all for profit. And so instead of actually trying to make people healthier, just do the alternative profit model that makes Joe Rogan rich. That's what healthcare is for that kind of guy.
Yeah. Speaking of islands and health, Google Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Samoa measles.
Yeah,
we'll be returning to that later.
Yeah, we'll get to all of this at one point. And my the RFK stuff I have been sort of like hesitant to weigh in on because of both a sort of like I wouldn't say that we had a deep personal relationship, but definitely someone who I've known for many years, I have worked with at various times, was very supportive of me, incredibly so at Air America. And my hesitancy is not exclusively or even necessarily primarily about that. But part of it is just sort of like trying to get a sense of what he's doing. It's very odd to me that he has been running in the Democratic primary and appearing primarily in right-wing outlets. I get the idea that he's not going to be allowed on to mainstream cable news. I get that. But there's no doubt that he wouldn't be able to get on like independent media, it seems to me. It just it does not feel like a concerted effort to reach Democratic primary voters.
Yeah. And you can also look from the outside. I have sympathy too for like the fact that, of course, of people alive in America today, it makes sense for RFK Jr. to be more conspiracy minded than the average person, given what has happened to his family. But at the same time, like what's happening right now is dangerous. Some of the stuff he was saying about Wi-Fi and like, I mean, man, that's deep conspiracy hole stuff that he was espousing on Rogan. But I guess, honestly, the Rogan audience, they should just unplug their Wi-Fi. They shouldn't go on the internet anymore. Maybe that's the answer.
Here is, let's look at this. It's interesting. We covered this to a certain extent. It was national news about the switch that a representative, is it Cotham?
Yeah.
In North Carolina made to a Democrat who had run, speaking quite eloquently about the horror of abortion ban in North Carolina. She won, and within months, switched to the Republican Party and helped them pass an abortion ban in North Carolina. This story out from WRAL News reports that a North Carolina town council member is suing Tim Moore. This is the North Carolina House Speaker, for allegedly having an affair with his wife. But there is also sort of like other issues here at play, because there was some rumors that rep who switched parties also had an affair with this guy.
Yeah, this guy's a Chad.
This is an interesting development.
A Wake County assistant principal is suing the leader of North Carolina's House over accusations of an affair. Scott Lassiter filed the suit against House Speaker Tim Moore. Lassiter ran for the state house last year and serves on the Wake County Soil and Water Conservation Board. He's accusing Moore of having an affair with his wife for more than 3 years. His wife, Jamie, no longer lives with Scott. She works as the executive director of the North Carolina Conference of Clerks of Superior Court. In a statement that she sent to WRAL, she and Moore call the accusations baseless and false. North Carolina is one of the few states that allows spouses to sue for an affair. Lassiter is seeking more than $25,000 in damages. And this morning, his attorney is speaking out, saying the complaint speaks for itself. There is irrefutable evidence to support Mr. Lassiter's claims.
The interesting thing here is that you get the sense that there's that they really want to get, and I think it's bizarre that you can sue somebody for having an affair with
I don't know if that should be
ridiculous.
allowed. Yeah.
But with that said, The lawsuit itself. Scroll up a little bit here and put this up on the screen. Scroll up a little bit. Keep scrolling up a little bit.
He can't.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So the idea is that the suit says that the husband had heard rumors his wife was having an affair with Moore. He surveilled his wife, et cetera, and then it keeps going. Keep going. And she admitted to it. She confessed, and this and that. And the idea is that the lawsuit also says, keep going, that there is has to do with getting political favors. Keep going. This suit, this piece says that he's suing for over $200,000 in damages, not $25,000 in damages. So it's unclear. But the interesting thing is going to be what comes out in discovery if this suit goes forward.
Yeah.
It seems bizarre to me that you can sue in this way, but the discovery is going to be a big part of it because this guy was rumored to be in an affair with the
woman who switched to give them a super majority, right? And yeah, Trisha Cotham. So, and he's the speaker there in North Carolina.
Strange.
Yeah.
Wow.
Apparently they were doing it seems like some swinger situation or yeah.
That's what is alleged, at least in the complaint.
But I don't understand how it's kind of an aside, but why can you sue the man that was having she's your property, I guess. But I forgot about that.
I think that's probably insane. I think that's probably what it is.
It's like he didn't violate the contract. She did.
Right. Well, he
that's my property.
Induced her to violate the contract.
Oh yeah, I guess that must.
And the interesting thing here in this report is that there's a John Doe defendant alongside Tim Moore, who apparently Moore requested to input a camera into the husband of the woman he was having an affair with's house to use as blackmail to not pursue any claims against him.
Oh,
there's a lot of strange stuff that's going on.
What's going on in the North Carolina State House?
Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. Watch this space, as they say. Where are we with? Oh, I haven't even turned on the thing, have I? All right, let's do. We'll take two callers. Okay. 646-257-3920. 646-257-3920 is the number. We'll take two callers, ladies and gentlemen. Daredevil. I'd like to recommend a YouTube video from Adam Ragusa on the cooking advantage of electric and induction over gas stoves. Many gas stoves advantages can be debunked. Many chefs don't question what they are taught and don't know that they're talking about. They're not scientists. Excuse me. Calling from a 917 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Is this me?
Yes, it is you.
Oh, wow. Okay. Hi, I am, I'll use my I am name. I'm NYC driver. I'm on 10th Avenue right now.
All right. Driving. Fair enough. What's on your mind?
I just became a member, 2 months ago.
Look at that. You didn't even have to ask.
So more like 3 months ago, for a bunch of anti-capitalists, you convinced me to buy 2 books. So you guys are good at what you do.
All right. Nice. Great.
So actually, I'm pretty, I would consider myself to be pretty left on a lot of issues, but I am a big Joe Rogan person.
Okay.
That's from being an MMA guy and a fan of that in general. But, I don't know, I'm actually just surprised you took my call. Sorry.
No worries. What do you want? What is it that you want to say about Joe Rogan?
I mean, I'm back. And I think the sort of rhetoric around the idea that Joe Rogan is an anti-vaxxer. I mean, versus the idea of alternative treatments. Like, you know, it's the whole Jimmy Dore sort of like how he sort of co-opted like pursuing treatments outside of big pharma, or how there's a concerted effort within the pharmaceutical industry to, you know, not research certain things. I just wanted to know, sort of, obviously, some of the stuff that RFK has been putting out, like this, like clear anti-vax stuff, is kind of harmful. But how do you sort of walk that line between sort of not being completely beholden to mainstream or sort of the way the medical industry is sort of incentivizes certain treatments over others?
Well, I mean, I got news for you. I get some bad news for you about the holistic world too.
Yep.
That is completely unregulated.
And
you know
for-profit,
that, right?
yeah.
I mean, completely unregulated, completely for profit. So,
sure.
I mean, that is.
So it's worse.
I mean, in many respects, it's worse. The reason why you don't hear as many big lawsuits is because they don't. The only thing is they can't make any claims, and they just official claims. I'm not sure what you're saying. I think that yes, skepticism is warranted with much of what happens in terms of like our politics, and in terms of like health, and why are we getting prescribed this process over another? But I think really the best, if that is really your concern, okay? Like, for instance, let me put it in this way. Let me take it out of the realm of pharmaceuticals for a moment. The reason why, in part, why our costs are so high in this country for medical care is because there was a great piece by Atul Gawande, maybe this is now 15 years ago, maybe more, comparing the Medicare, or I should say the costs of healthcare in one city versus another in Texas. And it was found that, we don't have the controls. Health insurance doesn't have the controls over using, when doctors own their own medical devices, they'll use them more often than is actually warranted because they have them and they want them. They're driven by, recouping their investment. They believe that these are the best things to have, but that there's some motivated reasoning there that's going on. If you're concerned about drug companies exploiting people for profits, the most obvious reform you should propose is to diminish the ability for them to make profits from these things. That would mean a single payer healthcare type of situation. That would mean patent reform. That would mean the government producing these drugs in, if not 100% of the time, 50% of the time, let's say. If not everything on patents, then all the generics. If that was genuinely what you were about, that would be the reform that you would be promoting, because there is no other way. If there is a conspiracy by the for-profit, I mean a broad conspiracy,
all of medicine,
by the for-profit medicine industry, they have captured the FDA. And look, I have spent a lot of time with Bobby talking about these issues. I have gone for a decade and talked to lawyers like him and him on these specific issues, where you have drug companies that continue to produce stuff that they know can harm people. There's some value to them in some instances, but they know the harm is being done there and they hide it. So I am not doe-eyed about this. But if you think there is a broad conspiracy, which is that this is the entire industry, the one reform that you can propose, if you have a platform, let's say the size of like a Joe Rogan's or a Bobby Kennedy's, is to socialize this, to take the profit incentive out of it. But they don't do that.
100%.
And in fact, they fight against that idea. So what is left? What is left? How would you deal with this? Even electing Bobby Kennedy and putting him in charge of the FDA, that's only going to fix it until, he's 69 years old. How is it going to change 5 years from now? Like,
no,
they're not addressing even the problem they say that exists. This is the functional equivalent of Alex Jones saying that our world is run by the Bilderberger Group, because it leaves you with completely disempowered.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think this is BS. Because what is the solution to this? It is obvious. It is fight to take the profit factor out of it, but they never go there.
100%. I mean, I think it's really, Rogan shifted pretty hard when he landed in Texas. I mean, that where it's just sort of unlistenable.
You're breaking up a little bit, but my theory about Rogan is just, and also having known Rogan personally, 25 years ago, he's a bit of an idiot. He's not a total idiot, which is what makes him actually dangerous. If he was a total idiot, he wouldn't have had the success he has. But he's attitudinal. He fit at the right time. And, but this is a guy who was convinced that they were putting kitty litter boxes in schools because kids were identifying as cats. Not just convinced. He thought he had first-hand validation of this.
Or claimed to have.
Or he claimed to have. And I'm quite convinced he concocted it in his head. He was too high when he heard the story. And, somebody said, I heard this. And he thought it was, I saw this. And whatever. I mean, he's just not a reliable narrator. And
100%.
And he knows this. And so he won't have people on his show who will go at him about that fact. That's just the reality of it.
Yeah, no, agree. And just, I'll hang up, and left is best. But just the quickly on the whole holistic approach is kind of woo, and I completely agree with you there. I just think that there are some benefits. I mean, just from personal experience, having.
I'm not saying the holistic approach is woo. No. I'm not. Yeah. I mean, I think that you should eat well. You should get exercise. Yeah. You should not smoke. You should try and deal with stress. I think meditation is helpful. I think preventative health care is best. I'm not saying wholeness, is wrong. They're not saying that either. when they start advocating stuff, they're saying take something. It's not, and it's not, people, it's not just prophylactic stuff. I mean, they're moving product.
It's pharma without the responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, I think whole health is really important. I'm not against, the idea of supplements. I think it's helpful to have both skepticism about the value of a broad range of supplements that don't always necessarily get taken up by your body. And I think there's value about, knowing where your supplements come from in terms of vitamins and this and that. But their skepticism is, sort of it is unactionable except for, when they're out selling product.
Yeah, it's basically cool to be anti-vax, and that's why a lot of people are doing that. So completely agree. Thanks so much for taking the call.
Thanks for the call.
Yeah, I'm pretty cynical about alt med industry, chiropractic and stuff like that. I think it is as predatory as
well, chiropractors. I mean, yes,
but that's standard. That's maybe the most famous.
Maybe I was thinking. I mean, acupuncture, but that kind of. I mean, but at the same time, that kind of medicine also, it's very difficult to find an acupuncturist that your insurance covers and that kind of stuff. And yeah,
well, acupuncture and chiropractic are two different things.
Right.
Because, I can say this, that I mean, I just saw a guy on Twitter like who works in I think it's an emergency room, and he's like, "Don't let a chiropractor manipulate your neck."
Yeah.
Because I deal with about 1 or 2 of those a year. But nobody goes to the hospital with acupuncture
Right.
gone awry. Nobody has surgery because of acupuncture gone
Basically
awry.
like a massage.
If you know, and I know people who've had efficacy with acupuncture, but and certainly I know people who have had good experiences with chiropractors. I personally wouldn't go. I also don't like people touching me. But
like basic physical therapy should be more accessible to people.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And there's good chiropractors and bad chiropractors, and but the bottom line is that, like, you know, that is also not necessarily sort of like holistic healthcare in terms of, like, you know, preventative necessarily. It's what kind of treatment do you want to get, and at that point, you know, there's at least far more and far less damage that can be done theoretically by going to someone who's, you know, cracking your back or massaging you, or, you know, I personally, I go for least invasive. I've had back problems. I would never get back surgery unless, like, I could not walk. I just wouldn't do it. Because for every person I know who had successful back surgery, I also know people who are like, it did not help.
Yeah, right.
But, all right, final phone call of the day. We just said we'd do 2.
All right.
Got a lot of people who have been hanging on the phone for exactly 14 minutes. Calling from a 602 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? You are the second and final caller of the day. Well, maybe not.
Hello, 602?
602. Hello?
You're in the distance call. You're not talking on your mic.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, what's up?
Hey, first time caller. What's up, Sam?
Not much. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, hi, it's Ziggy from Arizona.
Ziggy from Arizona. What's on your mind?
Yeah, so I want to talk to you about Charles and his toilet paper. Oh no, wait, Turning Point USA. Yeah.
Okay.
So like
Charlie Kirk.
So yeah, I keep getting his ads all the time, and I keep trying to like block him. But every time when I block his ads, his ads pop up.
All right, and was that it?
Yeah, that's pretty much it, man. It's really annoying. It's like, what the heck, man? What's wrong with Google?
Ziggy, hold on to the phone because I'm going to go fix that right now. All right?
All right. Thanks, Sam. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, man.
Bye-bye. All right, we'll take one more call. Calling from 425 area code. Who's this? Where you calling from?
Hi, I hope you can hear me. I'm Spencer. I'm calling from L.A. It's a Seattle phone number, though.
Spencer from L.A. with a Seattle phone. What's on your mind?
Well, first of all, I just want to say, Sam, Emma, Matt, hi. I love you guys. I'm a huge fan. You really helped me discover some great political ideas out there. I wanted to talk briefly about something that I think you guys have brought up in recent months, and it's an issue of, I know this might sound the Kill Bill alarm, but I'll just start by saying I'm religious, and I'm very much on the left, and it's disheartening, not from your guys' end, but on my end, when I see so many fundamentalists out there really using religion as a weapon to go after the most marginalized, the sick, the weak. You know, earlier you guys were talking about folks like Jesse Waters, and I guess I have a kind of a two-pronged question for you, and maybe it's more philosophical. If you don't want to answer it, that's okay. Do you think there is a place for progressive-minded religious people, whether they're Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever? Do you think there's a place for progressive-minded religious folks on the left? And what can we do, excuse me, what can we do to allow if you'll allow me to be floofy for a sec, what can we do to allow our spirituality to create a more humane and more just and noble politics, the way that someone like Henry Wallace did, or individuals like that maybe?
I mean, I definitely think that there's a there's no less a place for religious-minded people in progressive politics than there is for non-religious-minded people. I mean, as long as, and this just goes for anything. If you were an engineer and you were like, I absolutely think that people should, believe a certain way about, ball bearings within the context of progressive politics, and that's the way that they made it. That would be problematic. Like I don't think there's anything intrinsically wrong with religion relative to our politics. There may be some issues that some people have with religion, or whatever. Like there are things about Judaism that I think, like I don't think it's helpful to teach my kids that, the Red Sea literally parted. I think it's good from a metaphorical standpoint, but frankly, I don't care what other people teach their kids about that in that regard. I have some issues, but I don't take them into the political realm that within fundamentalism, like, I think there's an argument that what you're doing to your kids is damaging long-term, frankly, for fundamentalists. But I don't take that into the realm of politics. Yeah. I am fine with live and let live. What I don't like is these fundamentalist values leaving your church and entering into our civic society and being imposed upon our civic society. If your religion is the source of why you want to take care of people in society who are less fortunate than you, great. If your religion is the source for why you think people should not be exploited in the context of their labor, if your religion is the source that says we should not empower any single human being by accumulating so much wealth that they have an outsized impact on the way our society is organized. If your religion is a source for that, great. I don't care what the source of inspiration is for people. But if those values, regardless of where they come from, are imposed and contrary to progressive ideas, then it becomes a problem. But I mean, look, there's a huge tradition of this. I mean, aside from Jesus, knocking over, financial reform and turning over the tables in the temple. But, within Catholicism, there's an equally sort of a social justice tradition. And within the context of Judaism, there's been a lot of great, socialistic movements that have come out of Judaism and Jewish values, and within the context of Islam, and in terms of like peace and whatnot. Like, I have no problem what the genesis of these ideas are. No pun intended. But and I don't think anybody does. I really don't. I mean, people have an issue with religion. As far as I'm concerned, that is something that is distinct from politics, and wanting to dictate for other people, what their religious or lack of religious beliefs should be. I don't believe in the notion of a all powerful being in the form of God up there that is male and, watching over me, et cetera, et cetera. If other people want to do that and inspires them to do stuff that is, in my estimation, consistent with like my issue set in politics, great. Right.
And I would say just briefly, because I think what you touched on is important. I mean, there has been a history in this country. I've talked to many friends of mine. Just full disclosure, I consider myself a cultural Protestant, but I lean towards the mystical dimensions of religion. And I actually teach undergraduate history courses to students at UCLA, so I'm doing a PhD here. And that's why I brought this up. I feel like if it is more holistic and it does allow you to come from a place of compassion rather than one of judgment and cruelty, I think that's important. And I've said to some of my friends that, it's a really sad irony that if American evangelical Christianity had embraced more the Jimmy Carters of its world rather than the Jerry Falwells and folks like that, if American Christianity had taken its cues from people like Henry Wallace, Roosevelt's VP from 41 to 45, which a man who believed in the social gospel, I think we'd see a much different American Christianity and a much different attitude toward religion in certain parts of the left. And I'm not trying to have a cry fest. I just wish it was a little different. I want to kind of get us to go in that direction.
Yeah, I think like you could look at like Reverend Barber and Repairs of the Breach and that sort of thing. Like organizing either within a faith or in an interfaith manner is the solution to what you should do. But then like what you expect from that, the media is not in a hurry to emphasize liberation theology.
Yeah.
It is much more happy to emphasize evangelical reactionary theology because that's helpful to power.
Yeah. I mean, I think the answer is to what to do is basically the same for everybody. Organize. And
organize and emphasize not the kind of limiting principles of what like a holy book is supposed to provide, but the ones that are more liberatory, as Matt said, and not using it as a dictate for other people's lives, but as a template for justice.
Right, I agree, and I mean, I've said to a few people, especially this satanic panic type attitudes amongst conservatives towards transgender folks. To me, it's egregious and wrong. I think it is my view as a person who believes in Christian mysticism, we should look out for these individuals who need our help and our love and our compassion, even if we don't fully understand everything that they may be personally experiencing. They're still, in my view, it sounds silly, but they're God's children, they're human beings, and they deserve to be loved and respected. And I feel like if there was a dimension of religion that allowed for that embraced, that put people's humanity first, we'd see a fundamentally different place for it on the left. But anyway, thank you guys. I really appreciate you taking my call and talking with me. It's a real honor. I'm a huge fan, so thank you.
Appreciate the call. Thanks. All right, one more quick one, because I think I know who this is. Calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? You are the final caller of the day.
Hey, Sam. It's Ronald Reagan.
That's who I thought. We have not heard from you, Ronald Reagan, and wanted to give you an opportunity.
Thanks. So I've been thinking about Joe Rogan and my experience both with the sort of holistic world and also growing up in like a high demand fundamentalist religion. And it's kind of interesting. I think in both there's a gateway I was born into Mormonism, so I didn't convert, but I was a Mormon missionary. And, it's all sales, basically. And you want to lead with the sort of, it's the milk before meat. So you lead with the stuff that anyone can get behind, and you put the really weird stuff on the very back end once somebody sort of bought in. And a few years ago, my wife started listening. My wife, R.I.P. Michael. He started listening to this podcast called The Fat Burning Man by, his name is Abel James. And it was like a very similar experience. So I think the point of all this is that, it doesn't start with Joe Rogan. It starts many years before, because this was like 12 years ago or something. But the podcast was all about, eating less processed foods and spending more time outside. And, sometimes doctors overprescribe medication when you could just like eat better. And it's like all of that stuff is true. Right. And then the next thing I know, he had a chiropractor on who was like, vaccines give kids autism. And I was like, what the fuck? But, you get the buy-in with all these sort of goodies, right? All the soft stuff that's easily digestible. And the next thing you know, you're really in this world. You're eating paleo and you're, buying the shoes with the toes, remember when that was like a thing?
Yeah.
Because it's better for the muscles in your feet or whatever to walk like a fucking caveman or whatever. And pretty soon you're bought in. And so it would be good to, I don't know if there's somebody who knows about this history, but it would be good to have somebody on or to talk more about, the health world and how it overlays with politics. I mean, I guess you're doing it today.
We had somebody on too from sort of part of that world during COVID. I can't remember his name. He was I feel like he was Swedish maybe, and this was his like community. And he was his name escapes me, but yes. And I think like this idea of like this funnel, right? I mean, that's what they call it in sales, is a funnel. And yeah, of course you should go outside and you should eat, as little processed foods as possible. Of course you should do that. Who would argue with that? And then, yes, you introduce these things that are like a little bit weird, but not that weird. And certainly the trust has been built for like, this is a person who believes that we should be eating non-processed foods. I mean, who could argue with that? And then, yes.
And the next thing you know, you're wearing fucking magic underwear and doing weird handshakes in the fancy building on I-5 North. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think it taps into like notions of purity as well, where there needs to be a purity in my existence, in what I'm ingesting, in what I'm experiencing and what's going into my body. And then you can exploit a certain kind of paranoia that you initially like that has legitimacy, as we've spoken about, where people don't feel that they're in control over their healthcare in this country because of for-profit healthcare. And then you both create and feed into like an unhealthy level of paranoia.
Somebody's suggesting conspirituality, and I wonder if the person we had on was the host. I can't remember. The names don't look familiar to me on there, but I can't remember exactly who it was. But interesting. Yeah, I think that might be valuable, because it certainly is the same template, even if it's not necessarily. And I don't think people. There is there is a sort of like a. I don't know how conscious necessarily like these people are of what they're doing in terms of like building these sort of cult-like followings or ideologies or scripts. But I think sometimes, it varies, frankly. I think, just some people have a certain type of charisma and they have a certain type of whatever it is, and that's where they gravitate towards. That is the end of our phone call portion of the day. I'm going to read 5 IMs and then get out of here almost earlier than normal to celebrate Juneteenth. Joe G, regarding that weird moment of Biden saying, "God save the Queen, man," I like to think he was just a huge Sex Pistols fan and was just paraphrasing for you the lyrics. Salt Lake Lefty, Sam, if you ran for president, is Joe Rogan and Tim Pool obligated to debate you? Ooh, interesting idea. Really cool. Maybe invite your old colleague, Bobby Jr. on for a debate, vaccines and apartheid Israel. Also, you might want to share how, when your relationship with Bobby soured, people in chat are confused, or having Farron and Mike Papp on to discuss feelings for Bobby. I mean, I think it's likely at one point we'll have him on. I'm not sure in what context. I don't want to say that my relationship with Bobby soured per se. I think when we were doing Ring of Fire, he knew. I think we did have one episode where we talked about our relative feelings on vaccines, and that was probably 6, 7, 8 years ago, maybe now. It was before 2016.
It was right when I started.
When was that?
2015.
Yeah, okay. So 2015. Maybe I'll try and dig that up and listen back to that. And, at the time, I think he's sincere. I think he sincerely believes this. He certainly did then. And seemed to be immune or vaccinated, if you will, from hearing any other narrative about it. So I wouldn't say that my relationship soured. I was just like, I can't go along with this. And it was, and the show, and I think we stopped doing the show together shortly after that, but it wasn't a function of that as much as like he and Pap just had other commitments to do. And I ended up doing the show alone, I think starting in 2016. I'll go back and check on this. So it wasn't like that the relationship soured. I should also say that it like, I didn't hang out with Bobby. And occasionally we would trade, texts. That's it. It was not, I just don't have, close relationships with anybody. So that's
except John Benjamin.
Except for John Benjamin. And that is like a bane of my existence.
Yeah.
So, my relationship with John Benjamin soured many, many years ago, but we still go through the motions. So I hope that clarifies things. Maryland mailman, your white asses need to work every Juneteenth.
Fair enough.
Have you read my email? What we see here where I live is that more and more former anti-COVID folks are now becoming freemen too, which is so sad to see. I'm not sure I know what that is.
What's freeman?
That sounds like maybe like I don't know, like Freemasons? I don't know what that is.
I mean, in 150 years ago,
right.
it was former slaves.
Yeah.
Sugar canery. One time my friends and I were making donuts on a gas stove. You get a pan filled with hot oil. You deep fry biscuits in a donut shape. Delicious. I dropped a donut in the pan and splashed my friend with hot oil. Oh. She screamed, but grabbed a paper towel to get wet and wrap around her finger. Her husband was annoyed by our shenanigans and went to leave the room. My friend unknowingly got oil paper towel too close to the flame and caught on fire. She waved to her husband with the burning paper towel and yelled, it's fine, don't go. And he took in the sight of her and turned around. She was not badly injured, and the burning paper towel was put out without any damage, but it was a hilarious sight. That sounds more scary than hilarious,
scary.
But okay.
I was on the edge of my seat.
Yeah. Final I am of the day. Dave from Jamaica, not to be harsh to the caller, but most old Joe Rogan heads, me included, stopped watching him years ago when he went right wing. He boring now, to be honest. Rogan likes to claim humbleness, but also doesn't like to be challenged. Indeed. Bradley, Matt, Emma, great job today. Happy Juneteenth. See you folks tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth